Prince William's startling decision to ban Queen Camilla's son from Birmingham Palace after he lost his royal title for breaching royal protocols came as a shock to Queen Camilla. Welcome, viewers, to my channel. Please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. From the moment he was born, Queen Camilla's son lived a life shaped by expectations, privileges, and a gaze that never truly left him. Unlike children who grow up with the freedom to stumble, explore, and falter in private, he entered a world where every step was scrutinized, every gesture examined, and every word recorded as part of a public ledger. The palace, with its intricate halls and sprawling gardens, might have seemed like an enchanted realm to an outsider. Yet to those born into royalty, it was a place of constant performance, a stage upon which they were never permitted a moment away from observation. Even as a boy, he understood that his actions carried consequence, that errors were magnified, and that family reputation was a currency far more precious than toys or treats. Camilla, having endured decades of public scrutiny herself, recognized the pressures her son would face. She knew that growing up within the royal family demanded not only poise and intelligence, but also a capacity for restraint and discretion that few children naturally possess. Yet she also wished for him to experience moments of genuine childhood, joy, to play, to laugh freely, and to feel love in a way that transcended royal expectations. It was a delicate balance, nurturing a young man in a world that demanded perfection while shielding him from the harsh gaze of both media and monarchy. In his early years, the young royal displayed remarkable promise. He was bright, curious, and unusually perceptive for his age. Tutors remarked on his quick intellect. Palace staff admired his charm and courtesy, while family friends frequently commented on his effortless ability to navigate formal gatherings without seeming stiff or rehearsed. Beneath this polished exterior lay a complexity that only those closest to him truly understood. He possessed a streak of independence, a desire to test boundaries and challenge conventions, even in subtle ways. This blend of innate curiosity and awareness of consequences shaped a young man who was intelligent beyond his years, yet restless within the constraints of tradition. Public appearances, while glamorous to outsiders, were rigorous exercises in discipline. At formal events, he learned the intricate protocols governing interactions, how to stand, how to bow, how to respond to questions with grace, and how to project the dignity expected of someone connected to the crown. Every smile was rehearsed, every handshake deliberate. And yet, despite this rigidity, Camilla encouraged moments of spontaneity, recognizing that the cultivation of character required more than polished manners. She insisted that he read widely, pursue interests beyond palace life, and forge connections with people who would challenge him intellectually and emotionally. These formative experiences gave him a depth that made him both relatable and exceptional, a rare combination in a world often criticized for artificiality and detachment. Even as a child, he witnessed the duality of royalty, the allure of status paired with the relentless pressure to conform. Celebrations were always under the watchful eyes of photographers, journalists, and palace officials, leaving little room for privacy. Birthdays, holidays, and even casual outings were carefully orchestrated, with staff ensuring nothing disrupted the impeccable image expected of the family. Yet in quieter moments, away from prying eyes, he discovered small pockets of freedom, running through the palace gardens, listening to music in his private chambers, or sharing jokes with trusted friends. These glimpses of normality became precious refuges, offering him a sense of identity beyond the expectations of royal life. As he entered adolescence, the pressures intensified. The media, ever eager for glimpses of the young royals, began scrutinizing his behavior more closely. Paparazzi photographs captured fleeting moments, often misconstrued or exaggerated, feeding stories that shaped public perception. Every misstep, however minor, became fodder for headlines. Camilla's son learned early that his life was no longer entirely his own. It belonged partly to the crown, partly to the public, and partly to the narrative crafted by the media. This awareness fostered a carefulness in him, a mindfulness of how his actions might ripple outward. Yet it also sowed seeds of rebellion, a quiet, simmering frustration at the lack of autonomy he could claim over his own life. Within the family, dynamics were both supportive and challenging. Camilla, protective yet firm, was a stabilizing presence. She offered guidance, encouragement, and perspective, helping her son navigate the labyrinth of rules that governed behavior and expectations. Prince William, as a figure of authority and example, was both mentor and enforcer. While William's role demanded firmness, it also provided a model of leadership and decisiveness that the young royal could observe and learn from. Yet relationships were complex. The desire to assert independence often clashed with the need for approval, creating an internal tension that simmered beneath the surface. It was a strain that would later prove pivotal in shaping the choices that led to scandal. Education played a significant role in molding his character. Tutors provided not just instruction in traditional subjects, but also lessons in history, diplomacy, and the nuances of social interaction within the royal sphere. He was exposed to discussions about governance, the responsibilities of monarchy, and the delicate balance between tradition and modernity. These lessons, while academic in form, carried emotional weight. He absorbed the unspoken understanding that his choices could affect not only his own life, but the reputation of the family, and by extension, the monarchy itself. Yet within these lessons also lay the seeds of curiosity and independent thought, the recognition that rules, while important, could be questioned, interpreted, or navigated with subtlety. As he matured, his personality became increasingly complex. On one hand, he displayed a deep sense of empathy, understanding the feelings of those around him and often advocating for fairness in small matters. On the other hand, he wrestled with the constraints imposed by his environment. The desire to explore personal interests, forge authentic relationships, and make independent choices was constantly tempered by the knowledge that deviation could carry severe consequences. This duality defined him, a young man capable of profound insight and compassion, yet always conscious that his freedom was conditional, fragile, and constantly observed. Friendships and relationships outside the palace were carefully managed, yet deeply meaningful. He learned to value loyalty, trust, and authenticity in others, quickly recognizing those who were genuine versus those drawn to privilege and status. These connections provided a grounding influence, offering perspectives that the palace walls could not. Yet even in these relationships, the shadow of his royal life loomed large. Every outing, every conversation carried the risk of exposure, scrutiny, or misinterpretation, making trust both precious and precarious. The young royal's early experiences foreshadowed the challenges that would later define his life. The combination of privilege, expectation, and personal curiosity created circumstances in which mistakes were never merely personal. They were symbolic, carrying significance far beyond the immediate context. He absorbed lessons about responsibility, consequence, and perception that would later clash with the rules he was expected to uphold, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would forever alter his relationship with his family within the palace. By the time he reached late adolescence, Camilla's son was no longer simply a child under her care. He had become a young adult navigating the intersection of personal desire and public expectation, fully aware of the delicate balance his life demanded. Every choice he made, every action taken in private or public, was influenced by the understanding that his life was intertwined with legacy, tradition, and scrutiny. Yet even with this awareness, he retained a spark of independence, a desire to carve his own path and assert autonomy in ways that, though subtle, hinted at the conflicts to come. Within the palace, observers remarked on his poise, intelligence, and composure. Staff and aides noted the quiet confidence he exuded, his ability to remain composed under observation, and the flashes of wit and curiosity that made him both relatable and distinct from the rigid formality of the household. Even in social settings beyond the palace, he demonstrated an unusual ability to adapt, connecting with people from all walks of life while maintaining an acute awareness of the responsibilities imposed by his title. These qualities, while admirable, also made him acutely aware of the expectations placed upon him and the consequences of misjudgment, a combination that would become central to the story of his later fall from grace. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes evident that the early life of Queen Camilla's son was defined by contrasts: freedom and restriction, affection and scrutiny, curiosity and caution. These formative experiences shaped not only his character, but also his approach to decision-making, loyalty, and risk. He learned to navigate the subtle pressures of royal life while retaining elements of individuality, a balancing act that would ultimately be tested in dramatic and very public ways. In retrospect, these years were a prelude to the moment when the collision between personal desire and royal duty would become unavoidable. His upbringing, education, relationships, and subtle rebellions of youth all contributed to the choices he would make and the consequences he would face. They set the stage for a dramatic conflict in which familial bonds, royal protocol, and personal identity would clash in ways that would resonate not only within Birmingham Palace but also throughout the public eye. The rise of Queen Camilla's son, therefore, is not merely a story of privilege or opportunity. It is a story of preparation, resilience, and navigating a world where appearances and perception carry as much weight as reality itself. It illustrates the complexities of growing up within royalty, a life where mistakes are magnified, freedom is conditional, and the consequences of a single misstep can echo through history. From the earliest days of his childhood, Queen Camilla's son was immersed in a world governed not just by rules, but by centuries of tradition so deeply embedded that even the smallest misstep could carry repercussions far beyond the immediate moment. Royal protocol was not simply a guideline for behavior, it was the invisible architecture of palace life, a framework dictating how every action, every word, and even every glance should be managed. To outsiders, these rules might seem archaic, overly rigid, or even trivial. Yet within the palace walls, they represented the delicate balance between maintaining respect, projecting authority, and upholding the legacy of a monarchy that spanned generations. The young royal quickly learned that protocol was omnipresent. Formal dinners, he was expected to observe seating arrangements down to the inch, greet dignitaries with precise gestures, and speak in a carefully measured tone. A misplaced word or casual motion could be interpreted as disrespect, impropriety, or worse, a signal that tradition had been disregarded. Tutors and aides drilled these lessons repeatedly, emphasizing that the crown relied as much on perception as on actual power. To be royal was to perform at all times, to embody the dignity of centuries, and to understand that every action could ripple outward, shaping public opinion, family reputation, and the very stability of the institution. Yet, protocol was not limited to ceremonial occasions. It permeated the smallest aspects of daily life. Walking through palace corridors, he was instructed on how to interact with staff and peers, when to speak and when silence was more appropriate, and on the subtle signals of distinction that marked the invisible hierarchy of the household. Even private moments carried weight. Conversations overheard by aides or staff could become material for official reports. Subtle gestures could be misread as intentional affronts. The palace was, in many ways, a gilded cage, a world of grandeur, intertwined with relentless observation. What made the burden heavier was that these rules were not written in a single guidebook. Many were inherited from tradition, enforced through social expectation, and passed down from one generation to the next with little explanation of their origin. Some rules made logical sense, while others seemed archaic, steeped in symbolism, rather than practicality, yet each held the power to enforce conformity. This ambiguity created a tension that followed the young royal as he grew, the need to perform flawlessly without ever fully understanding the rationale behind every expectation. The cost of error was often measured not merely in punishment, but in loss of reputation, trust, or opportunity. The palace had long been a theater where missteps were magnified. History offered countless examples: a slight breach of decorum at a diplomatic reception, an untimely joke during a ceremonial event, or an informal comment in public could ignite scandal. Even the smallest infraction had the potential to dominate headlines, inviting public scrutiny and media speculation. For Camilla's son, these stories were not distant cautionary tales. They were constant reminders of the stakes involved. Each day he navigated a landscape where appearances were as critical as intentions, and where a lapse in judgment could threaten not only personal standing, but also the integrity of the family name. Among the many protocols he faced, some were rooted in respect for hierarchy. For instance, addressing senior family members, acknowledging rank, and adhering to formal titles were daily exercises in mindfulness. Camilla's son learned to anticipate the expectations of each individual in the household, from the monarch to visiting dignitaries, and adjust his behavior accordingly. Even in moments of private conversation, the unspoken awareness of protocol, dictated tone, word choice, and body language. It was a constant, invisible pressure, a delicate dance between personal authenticity and institutional compliance. Other rules were more symbolic, yet no less impactful. The timing of public appearances, the manner in which he greeted guests, and even the colors of his attire were carefully curated to signal respect, continuity, and harmony with royal tradition. A single misstep, an overlooked greeting, a casual gesture, an outfit deemed inappropriate, could be dissected by staff, journalists, and public commentators alike. These lessons were not theoretical. They carried immediate consequences, teaching him early that royalty demanded vigilance in all aspects of life. Yet the burden of protocol was not merely external. It shaped his internal world, instilling a tension between duty and desire, tradition and individuality. He understood that the choices he made were never purely personal. They were statements of loyalty, evidence of character, and markers of his commitment to the family and the monarchy. At times, the weight felt overwhelming, a suffocating pressure that left little room for error, spontaneity, or the pursuit of personal interests. It was in these moments that his personality, curiosity, and independence began to clash with the rigid structures around him, foreshadowing conflicts that would later escalate into dramatic consequences. As he grew older, the palace environment emphasized both discipline and observation. Tutors and advisors reinforced lessons in etiquette, diplomacy, and social acumen. Yet they also scrutinized his behavior with a critical eye. He was constantly reminded that mistakes were never private. The palace operated under a system where accountability extended beyond individual actions to reflect on the family and the institution. He learned that discretion, patience, and foresight were not merely desirable traits, but essential survival skills. A single lapse in judgment could disrupt relationships, diminish trust, and even jeopardize opportunities within the royal sphere. Family dynamics added another layer to the burden. Camilla, while supportive and loving, was herself acutely aware of the importance of adherence to protocol. She sought to guide her son without stifling his individuality, teaching him the subtle art of balancing personal authenticity with the demands of tradition. Prince William, in contrast, embodied responsibility and the weight of precedent. His expectations were strict, and his enforcement of rules unwavering. The young royal existed in the space between these two influences, nurtured and protected, yet constantly reminded that the rules of monarchy were non-negotiable and profoundly consequential. The public dimension of protocol further amplified the stakes. Every appearance, every interaction, every gesture could be photographed, broadcast, or analyzed, creating a permanent record open to interpretation and scrutiny. The young royal's awareness of this dual reality, being both a private individual and a public symbol, was acute. He understood that failing to navigate these expectations could lead to embarrassment, scandal, or even a loss of trust within the family. This awareness created a tension that shaped his choices, making him cautious, yet at times restless, disciplined yet quietly defiant, mindful of the rules yet eager to explore boundaries. By the time he approached young adulthood, the weight of royal protocol had become an inseparable part of his identity. He had internalized lessons about appearance, behavior, and social expectation. Yet the desire to assert personal agency remained strong. This tension between conformity and independence defined his character, setting the stage for a pivotal moment when his choices would collide with centuries of tradition. The protocols that had guided his upbringing were no longer abstract concepts. They were tests of loyalty, courage, and judgment, carrying consequences when breached. The palace itself seemed to reflect this tension. Its halls, adorned with portraits of ancestors and relics of history, reminded him constantly that his life was part of a continuum larger than himself. Every room, every ceremonial artifact, whispered the weight of legacy and expectation. It was in this environment that he learned both the beauty and the burden of royalty, the honor of connection, the responsibility of representation, and the ever-present vigilance required to avoid error. Yet, even amid these lessons, the desire for autonomy persisted, a quiet yet insistent force that would soon challenge the structures around him in ways no one could fully anticipate. The burden, of royal protocols was not simply about manners or ceremonial correctness. It was about identity, choice, and consequence. It was about navigating a world where a single misjudgment could reshape not only personal destiny, but also the reputation of an entire family. For Queen Camilla's son, these rules were both a roadmap and a restraint, guiding his actions while limiting the expression of his individuality. They were the invisible scaffolding of palace life, present in every interaction, every decision, and every moment of reflection, shaping the man he was, becoming even before the fateful moment that